make some sense of it all. But I can see it makes no sense at all. Is it cool to go to sleep on the floor? 'Cause I don't think that I can take anymore. Clowns to the left of me, jokers to the right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
Good morning, everyone. Lots going on as usual. Today is Tuesday, June 24th, 2025, and Canada is joining the EU. What does the most European, non-European nation even mean? I have no idea, but Mark Carney keeps saying things, and I don't think those things mean what he thinks they mean. So it's very, very interesting. Also, he says that the world is a more dangerous place and more divided place. He keeps saying this over and over, almost like a mantra, almost like he's trying to bring it to fruition, right? And I think that that's happening because of the bad policies that are being forced on us by people like Mark Carney, globalists like Mark Carney. Trump and Israel and Iran ceasefire. Holy smokeronis. This is big news, everybody. NATO meetings are happening today as well, with the backdrop of Trump just unilaterally ending 40 years of Iran saber rattling for nuclear conflict, right? So what does he even need NATO for, right? He could just go out on his own. It's a very interesting situation that's happening. And again, with the backdrop of Canada strengthening ties with the EU and NATO, and Canada not meeting its defense spending, but also now committing hundreds of billions of dollars, $250 billion to EU and their rearmament. And that's weird because we don't even have sleeping bags for our army. So the government doesn't have, or there's a report that was commissioned by the government for the government to put together, and the department's come to the conclusion that the gun buyback scheme is going to fail because Canadians don't have any faith in the government. Shocker. Edmonton by-election winner, you'll never guess. You've got 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count. And Nenshi won, of course he did. New Muslim mayor of New York, not yet, but coming very soon. We'll look at that at the end of the show. Nigel's on board with the Britannia card. He loves it. You know why? He wants as many immigrants as possible. So, okay, everybody's on board. Nigel has been co-opted. And what is alligator Alcatraz? You will find out before the end of this show, I promise you. So there's lots to get to. Let's get to it. First, Dan McTeague. We're talking in EU, or we're starting in the EU. We're talking about closening or strengthening ties with the EU. Mark Carney's gone to the EU just before the NATO summit to commit to this and to sign Canada up for, again, trillions of dollars in spending. And I haven't seen the Conservatives talk about this at all, right? Like, where are they? Andrew Scheer? Where are they? Pierre Poilievre? Nowhere to be found. Voting for C5 with amendments and allowing Prime Minister Carney to sign us up for $1 trillion worth of EU rearmament. Dan McTeague says Carney's working without a mandate to do so, and guarantee that the living standard in Canada will crater. Stockwell Day says, in Canadian history, no prime minister has so radically and swiftly shifted the sovereign priorities of Canadians to Europe without debate or mandate, aligning us with economic and social policies that are crushing the EU while declaring shared values with China. Actually, what didn't he say that Muslim values were Canadian values? Weird. Super weird. Here's the Bucky Will, and he's responding to the Western Standard. Canada signs landmark security pact with the EU, commits $237 billion, that's billion with a B, to defense fund. Wow. And he says, good thing Carney's sticking to his budget. Right? Because there isn't a budget. That's the joke. Darn. Otherwise, this would be awkward. Oh, wait. Take all the time you need. Basically, our deficit just increased another $237 billion. So, yay. I love when bank robberies happen right in front of you and you're sitting there with your hands up, right? Elbows up or whatever. Okay, I'll do whatever you want, man. Mark Carney says Canada's new government has a mandate to strengthen and diversify our international partnerships. Today, we're delivering, starting with a new era of cooperation with the European Union. We will bring Canada and Europe far closer together in every facet of our relationship. Yikes. Including trade, digital, and defense to create more stability, security, and prosperity. That doesn't make me feel better at all. Here is D. Prairies, and they're responding to Stockwell Day and his statement about Mark Carney's closer ties with Europe. And he says, hey, Conservative Party of Canada, are you totally lost? Get your head out of your asses and start standing up to and stopping these radicals. Seriously, WTF? Pierre Poilievre, what's the plan? Oh, we're watching the plan. This is the plan. The plan is to bankrupt Canada, and then Canada will beg Europe for assistance or something like that because they're our super best friends now. And Europe will say, sure, you just have to hand over all your mineral rights and everything, the rest of it. And I don't know how we're getting screwed, but we're definitely getting screwed up and down every which way in this deal and all the deals that it seems Mark Carney is making. Here is Ryan. He says, there's no doubt Mark Carney is talking about CBAM, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism here. He says the future of trade takes carbon into account. So the United States isn't doing that. Trump is saying, no, we're not going to do any of that anymore. We're going to trade and we're going to streamline it and make it efficient. And we're going to get rid of all this nonsense because it's nonsense. And even Argentina is breaking ties with Canada over the climate change stuff, which is interesting. But Carney is committing and bringing us closer to Europe so he can keep the climate change grift thing going. And, isn't that interesting? But here's Carney on climate change and carbon taxes on trade, carbon credits on trade. He says that's the future of trade. Carbon is trade.
And that's the future of trade. That's the future of trade. The future of trade is digital. The future of trade does take carbon into account. Carbon is trade, right? The future of trade, it does have this defense cooperation. It is consistent with industrial policy, recognizing that industrial policy amongst allies, we're all going to NATO, but only some of us in NATO are talking about an allied industrial policy that will make us stronger. That's the future of trade, not a narrow discussion on tariffs.
I've got other color on this that actually sounds like it's based in reality closer to the end of this series of tabs here. Here's another clip of Carney, and Concerned Canadian says what he's actually saying is that he'll do anything he can to transition Canada into a WEF beachhead. And yeah, I think that's accurate. Here's Carney, and I've got a 4-minute long version of this one as well, but it's a little long for this podcast this morning. Here's Carney.
A world that's more dangerous and divided. A time where the rules-based international, the global order, rules-based global order is under threat, in a time when technological change is accelerating. And we really have two choices as a jurisdiction, as a country in this circumstance. We can nostalgically look back and long for the old order to somehow return, or we can build a new one with purpose and partnership. And as the most European of the non-European countries, Canada looks first to the European Union.
Do we? What?
To build a better world.
Listen, I'm a first-generation Canadian, and my parents were both from Europe or the United Kingdom and Greece. So it's one of those things where I've been to Europe, I've been to the United Kingdom, and maybe there are a lot of similarities, but I've been to the United States too. And you know where there's more similarities? I certainly don't look to Europe first. I mean, in some things, but that's just because of my heritage. But certainly if I was representing Canada, I wouldn't say, all those similarities between us and America, they also exist between us and Europe. Look at our electrical plugs. I mean, the electrical plugs are completely different in England or Europe, but not in the United States. You could just take your electrical appliance and plug it in just the same in the United States. And there are many other similarities between Canada and the United States that are different in England. So it's weird that he's saying, hey, we're the most European of non-European countries. What an idiotic thing. It's just pure rhetoric. It's pure propaganda. It's just moving his position forward. No basis in reality, but he doesn't care. And the people listening don't care either.
And that's what today is about. It's about building on our triple alignment of values, of interests, and of trust built over the years. And so today, this is a new era of cooperation. Our strategic Canada-EU or EU-Canada strategic partnership for the future will build a new and deeper relationship that brings us closer together, from defense to digital, from supply chains to security. We're launching comprehensive negotiations across multiple areas of cooperation, connection, trade, security, digital, climate. And this will make us both more resilient and more prosperous. In many respects, what we're committing to, from our perspective, Canada's perspective, is an ongoing process to an ever closer partnership that will bring our people closer together.
To what end? I mean, it's real expensive to send goods over across the Atlantic, a lot more expensive than it is to put it on a truck and ship it down to the United States, right? My gosh. Here's Mark Nixon responding to Mark Carney. He says, Mark Carney lied to get elected. Now he's signing Canada into a new world order with Europe. Digital ID, climate change agreements, carbon tracking, the whole WEF playbook. This isn't sovereignty, it's submission. Even the masked elbows up brigade didn't ask for this. Our elections are rigged. Nobody's actually asking for any of this. Here is Wide Awake Media, and they say the EU intends to launch its central bank digital currency, the digital euro, in October of this year, 2025. Despite opposition from the overwhelming majority of EU citizens, it will be fully programmable. That means they can control what you spend your money on. For example, they could restrict you to buying only 2 clothing items per month in the name of fighting climate change, of course, or they could require you to spend your savings before a certain date. Otherwise, your savings would vanish just to stimulate the economy. At that point, we have no financial freedom left. Right. And Catherine Austin Fitts has been talking about this for a long time, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think I put them in the wrong spot, but here is Wiretap Media, and this is Ursula von der Leyen, I believe, talking about EU and Canada's partnership. And she's responding to Mark Carney here.
That brings me to our economic security. Critical raw materials are at the heart of this effort. Canada is uniquely positioned with your unique resources. 90% of your mineral output is exported. That is music in our ears. And the European Union is, of course, proud to be the second largest customer. We want to deepen our cooperation with Canada by reinforcing our strategic partnership on raw materials. But our ambition goes far beyond that. That's why I'm pleased that we've agreed to launch the EU-Canada Industrial Policy Dialogue. That is a forum that will provide an opportunity for business leaders, government ministers, and commissioners from the European Commission to meet so that they can explore first-hand ways to strengthen our transatlantic supply chains in critical sectors, for example, sectors like clean technologies.
So there you go, Ursula von der Leyen saying, oh yeah, we can't wait, right? And Lizzie says, we are already in a one world government. There are 193 countries in the world. 193 countries have signed up to Agenda 2030. We already have a one world government. That's why they're able to do this. They already have control of every country. Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate, really. Man, I've got a thing. I'm going to pause it for a second. Okay, we're back. Here's from the Sean Newman podcast, and Bonnie says, the model has made perfect sense to explaining how everybody's acting. Europe's only path forward is to plunder Canada. That's why they hate Alberta. I don't know the connection between why they hate Alberta, but I agree that our financial system is in a grow or die Ponzi scheme. And if we don't find more suckers, the whole thing collapses in on itself. If people don't keep buying houses at the rate of people being imported over the last 5 years, then our entire economy collapses and the government loses control. Okay. So they're trying to find a way that we accept that they can continue to inject all of this money into the economy. And before it was bringing immigrants in and they would buy houses and you need to employ people to make the houses for the immigrants and so on. That's a treadmill you can't catch up to. So you continually make these jobs and the Ponzi scheme can continue, right? But now we're saying no. And so they're trying it in a different way, and that's by onboarding Europe. Okay. And so it's interesting to me just as a thought experiment as to the number of ways they can turn us to allow them to spend our money in ways that we would never agree with, except for the framing that they're doing. So here's this guy. He's breaking this down on the Sean Newman podcast. Bonnie shares this. The model makes perfect sense to explaining how everybody's acting. Europe's only path forward is to plunder Canada. That's why Ottawa hates Alberta. That's why Mark Carney is prime minister, and that's what has to end. Yeah, I thought this was interesting. 2 minutes. It's worthwhile. We're going to listen. Here we go.
It's very obvious at this point, I think, that Trump, Putin, and to a lesser extent, I even believe Xi, but I'm not quite on the, I'm still a little on the fence about this. They understand who the real enemy is, and the real enemy is continental Europe. And it's the old banking interests of colonial Europe that need to be destroyed. And that includes City of London, not Britain, City of London, the square mile. It's very important. That includes the Vatican. I hate to say it. And the goal is, if you look at everything that's happening, if you just look at all the little hotspots around the world and the way that things are shaping up, they are trying to bottle up the old pirates of colonial Europe so that they have no places to plunder. So they've lost Russia. They're losing the Middle East. Trump said very nice things about Erdogan, Turkey taking Syria, which blocks Israel
I don't feel so bad about me messing up Erdogan's name for so long, by the way, okay?
from going to war with Iran. The French have lost the Sahel region of Africa. That's all gone. The United States, nope, we're changing the way we do business. We're not going to allow Janet Yellen to spend us into debtor's prison and everything else. The United States is secured. What do all of these regions have in common? Unbelievable natural resource wealth. Europe has no collateral. I learned that from Alex Craner. And since then, that model has made perfect sense to explaining how everybody is acting. Europe's only path forward is to plunder Canada. That's why they hate Alberta. That's why Ottawa hates Alberta. That's why Mark Carney is Prime Minister, and that's what has to end.
So this is just an excerpt from a broader discussion and podcast. So the context for that's why they hate Alberta, that's why blah, 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 I'm not sure I understand entirely how that all ties in, so apologies about that. But I think Mark Carney's Prime Minister because he's placed in order to Canada's under the old guard at this point in time, and the conflict in Iran is shutting off the ability, or this is the speculation that he's kind of alluding to. Canada is connected to the United Kingdom, connected to Europe, and we're seen as a outgrowth of England, so can be plundered, okay? And so we are on the docket to be the replacement for all of these other places that were being plundered, but now are cut off because Trump's doing what he's doing. And so in the interim, we'll see what happens. But I think that that's very plausible. I think that we are in a situation where the old guard has control of certain areas and they're losing control of other areas. And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And as they lose control in other areas, they try and ramp up control here. And we suffer for it. How long will we tolerate it? I don't know. But I think that that's astute. Also, I understand the reason why it was in the Iran section. We'll look at that. And it does come into play. It absolutely does come into play. And we have to talk about NATO because all of these leaders are going to NATO today. And Trump is also going to NATO. Dan McTeague is responding to Mark Carney. Mark Carney says, NATO is a cornerstone of global security and defense. I'm here at the Leaders Summit to reinforce Canada's commitment to it so we can better protect our people, our sovereignty, and our allies. Yeah, well, sure. I don't believe a word Mark Carney says, but whatever. Dan McTeague says, hope you came with a pledge to borrow more money to come up with $70 billion you'll now owe to pony up to get to 3.5% of GDP for defense. Do you plan to tax the sale of primary residences or hide it by splitting the budget to make this impossible pledge disappear? We'll see. Impossible pledge. Yes, it is an impossible pledge. I don't think we have the money, but I don't think we have the money for the European commitment that we've made either. So great, right? Like that's not good. Aaron O'Toole is responding to Canada opening the door to European defense and security partnership. He says, this is very positive. It is certainly not a substitute for NATO in any way, but the more work we do with allies in Europe is key for our economic security. The Prime Minister must also swiftly fix procurement and help the defense industry scale up to ensure that we are true partners and beneficiaries for rearm Europe, which again seems weird. Seems like it's not our responsibility to rearm Europe. Why would we be rearming Europe when we don't have an army to talk about it all? Jim Ferguson says Trump heads into NATO, but this time he's not coming to smile. Air Force One lifts off from Andrews Air Base. The UK is no longer seen as a serious ally. Europe is on notice. The free ride is over. Sources, Europe has to build its own army. So it comes to Canada and says, you want to be part of our security group? We just need, I don't know, a couple $100 billion, $250 billion, whatever you mean. Yeah, okay. No. How about good luck with your army, guys? We're going to call up the United States to ask them if we can borrow some of their planes. So sources expect Trump to deliver a message at the summit that goes something like this: America will not bankroll global defense while our partners mock us, lie to their people, and elect weak leaders who can't be trusted. Hey, sounds like a cool message. I think that a strong message, an equally strong message, would be, why do I need to bankroll NATO when I just ended this war that NATO, or this threat from Iran that's been 40 years in the continuation, and you all stood around with hundreds of billions of dollars every year doing absolutely nothing about it. Why do I need NATO? Why do we need to spend money on this waste of time? Because it seems like a giant waste of time. Seems like they own both sides of the conflict. It seems like we're spending money to watch a big expensive show of bullshit while they light $100 bills on fire to light their cigars, right? Like, I'm not buying it. I think that these people are stealing from us and lying. But I think that that's across the board. I don't even think that that's contained to just NATO. I think it goes all the way down to municipal politics. How many municipal politicians went to Dubai on Bloomberg's dime, right? That's a problem. That's a big problem. It's a lot of them, by the way, and it's a problem. So, and they're all being paid off. They're all being bribed like that. Their egos are being inflated. You're so important. You're so powerful. Other people look to you, and people who doubt need to be, herded by you. You're like a sheepdog, Mayor Guthrie, right? And for climate action, which is bullshit, they're using them as pawns to steal from us, and quite successfully too. Here is the UK. The UK is no longer seen as a serious ally. Behind closed doors, the Pentagon is reportedly exploring major defense funding cuts to NATO. Good. Possible US withdrawal if allies continue to fail. That's good. There's lots of time in Trump's presidency. So if Trump pulls out of NATO now, he'll have 3 years of being out of NATO, presuming that he stays out of NATO, because sometimes he does things like this to get what he wants, and then he comes back and pays for it, and I don't understand. But hey, I don't have access to all the intelligence Trump's got. But anyway, sometimes I would love it if Trump pulled out of NATO, I think, because it seems like NATO is being used against the West at this point in time. It seems like all institutions are being used to take down the West, really, honestly. Possible U.S. withdrawal, blah, blah, blah. I said that. A full recalibration of global military priorities. Trust in Keir Starmer gone. Confidence in European leadership non-existent. Trump believes the alliance has become a liability and not an asset. What that means, NATO may not survive Trump's second term. That would be an interesting happening, wouldn't it? Britain's global relevance is rapidly collapsing. Europe's security umbrella is fraying at the seams. The U.S. is preparing to defend America first, with or without NATO. The post-World War II order is cracking wide open, and Trump's about to deliver the final warning, or the first blow. Yeah, that'll be interesting. We'll find out tomorrow. Can't wait. All right, let's talk about Iran. So Trump at 4 o'clock yesterday. Now, I know you know something about Iran. I know you've seen it in the news, et cetera, et cetera. That's why I started with the Canadian news first, or the European news first-ish, because Iran is over, right? Obviously, it's over. So this is kind of funny in hindsight from today to yesterday, right? Clandestine is reporting, Trump says on Truth Social, "Congratulations, world. It's time for peace." 4 o'clock. On June 23rd, 2025. And Clandestine says, Trump is acting like this conflict is over. I think Trump might have just pulled off the most successful geopolitical and military maneuver in world history. Did we just win? And then update, we won. And so hold on a second, we'll get there. And Syed Abbas, this guy, who is the foreign minister of Islamic Republic of Iran, says, as Iran has repeatedly made clear, Israel launched war on Iran, not the other way around. As of now, and this is 8:46 p.m., June 23rd, yesterday, 4 hours after Trump made the congratulations world, it's peacetime. As of now, there is no agreement on any ceasefire or cessation of military operation. However, provided that the Israeli regime stops its illegal aggression against the Iranian people no later than 4 a.m. Tehran time, we have no intention to continue our response afterwards. The final decision on the cessation of our military operations will be made later. So we haven't ceasefired, but we might later on tonight if Israel does. And Israel didn't really, and continued to bomb places in Tehran. Media Lies says senior Iranian officials announced Iran has accepted the ceasefire proposal announced by Trump. Just 1 hour ago, CNN claimed Iran had not received ceasefire proposal. So there was a lot of things. This is 7:11 p.m. on the 23rd. A lot of things were in flux, but it seemed that Trump was not lying. And Disclosed TV reports Iran's National Security Council agrees to a ceasefire with Israel. So there you go. And this is a little bit unrelated, I guess, but Trump is talking about Russia. He says, did I hear former President Medvedev from Russia casually throwing around the N-word, nuclear, saying that he and other countries would supply nuclear warheads to Iran? Did he really just say that, or is it a figment of my imagination? If he did say that, and if confirmed, please let me know immediately. The N-word should not be treated so casually. I guess that's why Putin's the boss. By the way, if anyone thinks our hardware was great over the weekend, far and away the strongest and best equipment we have, 20 years of advanced over the pack, is our nuclear submarines. They're the most powerful and lethal weapons ever built, and just launched the 30 Tomahawks. All 30 hit their mark perfectly, so in addition to our great fighter pilots, thank you to the captain and crew. So Trump's using the bully pulpit, man. He's saying, don't you dare even throw that N-word around. Here's Donald Trump reconfirming victory this is 6:22 p.m. And he says, congratulations to everyone. It's been fully agreed by Iran and Israel that there will be a complete and total ceasefire in approximately 6 hours from now when Israel and Iran have wound down and completed their in-progress final missions for 12 hours, at which point the war will be considered ended. Officially, Iran will start the ceasefire, and upon the 12th hour, Israel will start the ceasefire, and upon the 24th hour, an official end to the 12-day war will be saluted by the world. During each ceasefire, the other side will remain peaceful and respectful on the assumption that everything works as it should, which it will. I would like to congratulate both countries, Israel and Iran, on having the stamina, courage, and intelligence to end what should be called the 12-day war. This is a war that could have gone on for years and destroyed the entire Middle East, but it didn't and never will. God bless Israel, God bless Iran, God bless the Middle East, God bless the United States of America, and God bless the world. Donald Trump, President of the United States of America. And here is Donald Trump this morning, and he's upset. Trump says Israel and Iran don't know what the F they're doing because the ceasefire was breached a few times overnight, which we'll look at a couple of examples. But this is Trump this morning, and he's not happy.
Yeah, I do. They violated it, but Israel violated it too.
Are you questioning if Israel is committed?
Israel, as soon as we made the deal, they came out and they dropped a load of bombs, the likes of which I've never seen before. The biggest load that we've seen. I'm not happy with Israel. You know, when I say, okay, now you have 12 hours, you don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either. But I'm really unhappy if Israel's going out this morning because of one rocket that didn't land, that was shot, perhaps by mistake, that didn't land. I'm not happy about that. You know what? We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the fuck they're doing. Do you understand that?
So he seems kind of frustrated this morning. Here is Matt Walsh. He says, this is why the U.S. needs to back out of this completely. Let those countries sort it out. Not our problem. We don't need to be policing it. Trump has done all he can. Time to focus on ourselves, says Matt Walsh. And Trump again, he says, these guys got to calm down. Well, here's another clip of Trump talking about Israel and Iran this morning.
I don't think so, but I'm not happy that Israel's going out now. There was one rocket that I guess was fired overboard. It was after the time limit, and it missed its target. And now Israel's going out. These guys got to calm down. It's ridiculous.
How will you respond if you keep firing fire?
I didn't like plenty of things I saw yesterday. I didn't like the fact that Israel unloaded right after we made the deal. They didn't have to unload. And I didn't like the fact that the retaliation was very strong. But in all fairness, Israel unloaded a lot. And now I hear Israel just went out because they felt it was violated by one rocket that didn't land anywhere. That's not what we want, I'll tell you. And I'm telling you, I'm not happy about that, Israel, either. All I do is play both sides.
Okay, so there you go. So he's calling out Israel, and here's another Truth Social. He says, all caps, these are all caps from Trump. Israel, do not drop those bombs. If you do, it's a major violation. Bring your pilots home now. Donald Trump, POTUS. And so there you go. And Election Wizard says, Israeli media, Trump is on the phone with Netanyahu. So he called Bibi up. He's like, Bibi, get those planes to turn around right now. And so he did. And so a couple of minutes after that, Israel is not going to attack Iran, says Trump on Truth Social, not all caps this time. All planes will turn around and head home while doing a friendly plane wave to Iran. Nobody will be hurt. The ceasefire is in effect. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And so that was 7:30 this morning. Matt Walsh is responding to this. This is from Truth Social. And this is from the 23rd, just at 4 o'clock. Iran has officially responded to our obliteration of their nuclear facilities. This is before the ceasefire was announced, and this is just setting up. Nothing hit. There had been 14 missiles fired, and 13 were knocked down, and one was set free because it was heading in a non-threatening direction. I'm pleased to report that no Americans were harmed and hardly any damage was done. Most importantly, they've gotten it all out of their system, and will hopefully be no further hate. And so he's talking about Iran's response, and here's Trump talking about Iran's response as well. And he says, we knew they were going to fire it at us, and they didn't hit anything. So why did they do that? Maybe you'll talk about that later. So I think that that's interesting, right? So maybe Trump was negotiating peace the whole time. It's a bit of theater, right? Here we go.
You remember when I did something to Iran and they shot missiles? Well, those are typically very accurate missiles, but did you notice every single one of them missed, right? I wonder why they missed. I wonder why they missed. They went at a certain base that we had, a lot of people in that base, but they all landed a little outside the base. I wonder why. Someday you're going to think about that. Then you're going to think about, did we know they weren't going to hit the base too? But they didn't hit us. They needed some kind of reply, I guess, but they didn't hit us. You remember when I did?
So there you go. And take it with a grain of salt, right? Just because people are saying these things, and I believe that that's a video of Trump, but maybe it's true, maybe it's not. Maybe he was told something that wasn't true. I don't know. But always take it with a grain of salt, right? So it's interesting what he's saying, and it's interesting the implications. But there are other things happening at the same time too, right? Jackson says, just in, Israel struck an Iranian radar with 2 bombs, and their pilots returned home. The matter is over, and the ceasefire between Israel and Iran has entered force, and that was this morning at 8:10 a.m. So it seems that, a little bumpy, but ceasefire. And Zero Hedge is reporting yesterday at 1:30, the oil markets were like, meh, we're good. And Zero Hedge says oil now convinced the entire Iran-Israel war was just theater. So 12 days in, and the oil prices dropping across Canada right now too. 6 cents today, 3 more cents tomorrow. So the Israel 12-day war, done. Absolutely done and dusted, everybody. We'll see. We'll see tomorrow if it is still done and dusted, if something happens today, but I'm not really expecting anything to happen today. The thing I'm expecting to happen today is NATO. We'll see what happens with NATO if Trump goes in and wrecks the place. So we'll see. It'll be very interesting. I have no idea, but we'll see. And so with that, I think that brings an end to the live stream. So we're going to